All right, good afternoon. It's almost nice to be back. It is nice to be back. Yeah, it is nice to be back. This morning, the Secretary General, who, as you know, is attending the African Union Summit in Addis Ababa, spoke to a high-level humanitarian conference for the people of Sudan. He said that in his previous capacity as High Commissioner for Refugees, he saw firsthand the enormous generosity of the Sudanese people as they supported their own internally displaced population as well as refugees. Now, he added, the international community must show the same level of support to the Sudanese people in their moment of despair. Later in the day, he participated in the meetings of the African Union Peace and Security Council, which was done at the head of state and head of government level, on the situation in Sudan and on the situation in the eastern part of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And I'll have more on that later, on the situation on the ground. On Sudan, the Secretary General repeated that there is no military solution, that the parties to the conflict must engage in immediate cessation of hostilities. The Secretary General addressed the Peace and Security Council during a closed-door session, but as you can imagine, he repeated our calls to the parties to the conflict to engage for an immediate cessation of hostilities there. Speaking about the situation in the DRC, I can tell you that the Secretary General called for the swift implementation of the conclusions of the joint summit of leaders of the East African Community and the Southern African Development Community. Throughout the day, he had a number of bilateral meetings, including with the departing chairperson of the African Union, Mr. Moussa Faki, as well as the presidents of Kenya, Rwanda, and Guinea-Bissau. And as a reminder, he will deliver remarks tomorrow during the opening session of the African Union Summit that'll take place on Saturday. He's also, and that'll be on Saturday, and we'll obviously share those remarks with you. On Sudan, just to give you a bit more granularity and unpleasant granularity, to say the least, I can tell you that we are very much alarmed by the escalation of fighting in and around the Zamzam displacement camp in El Fasher, North Darfur. The Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs says the attacks by the rapid support forces on the camp have increased over the past week, with reports including satellite images indicating the use of heavy weaponry and the destruction of the main market area. International NGOs in Zamzam have reported extensive civilian casualties, with humanitarian personnel among those reportedly killed. Zamzam is estimated to be hosting hundreds of thousands of displaced people. And as you know, it is also among the locations in Sudan where famine conditions have been identified, making the reports of the destruction of the camp's market area particularly concerning. And in fact, it's one of these occasions where we seem to lose the right words to describe the horror of the situation. As you know, the World Food Program and its partners have been working to deliver the critical food and nutrition assistance to 300,000 displaced people in and around Zamzam. This latest round of violence puts families and critical aid operations at further risk. We demand that the parties to the conflict adhere to their obligations under international humanitarian law. Attacks on civilians and civilian infrastructure are prohibited. All sides must take steps to protect civilians from harm, and those seeking to leave the area voluntarily must be allowed to do so in a safe and dignified manner. And just to flag that on Monday at the Palais des Nations in Geneva, the Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Coordinator, Tom Fletcher, alongside Filippo Grandi, the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, will together launch the 2025 Sudan Humanitarian Needs and Response Plan and the Regional Refugee Response Plan for Sudan. They're expected to call for strengthened protection and support for civilians impacted by nearly 2 years of conflict, and in the need to assist nearly 26 million human beings in need inside Sudan and across borders. To move to the situation in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, which is bleak as well. Our humanitarian colleagues tell us that large numbers of people are fleeing combat zones in South Kivu. According to local partners, many people have sought safety in Bukavu in recent days as fighting moved throughout the province of South Kivu. Partners on the ground also say the M23 is currently in Bukavu, but no active fighting is being reported. Yesterday, partners delivered food assistance to and about 12,000 people in Abyei Island in Lake Kivu. Partners also started food distribution to more than 40,000 people in Kaleche, which is about 65 kilometers north of Bukavu. Meanwhile, in North Kivu, unexploded ordnance remains a major threat in Goma. Humanitarian partners also say that many displaced people are still on the move in and around Goma. Several displacement sites have also been vandalized and looted in recent days, and some humanitarian partners have relocated supplies to avoid further looting. We continue our assessments in and around the town of Goma, including in the towns of Rutshuru and Nyiragongo, where a large number of people have arrived in search of safety. In Nyiragongo, humanitarian partners report that schools are only minimally functioning. Hospitals have experienced extensive vandalism, and there is no water. Meanwhile, our peacekeeping colleagues in the DRC tell us that they have intensified their efforts to protect civilians after recent attacks by the Codeco armed group in Ituri province earlier this week. The head of MINUSCO, Bintou Keita, condemned the heinous attack which killed more than 80 civilians. On Tuesday, the mission set up 2 temporary operational bases in the villages of Lodha and Ar in the heart of Jugu territory to prevent the intensification of community violence and to protect civilian populations. The mission has also deployed reinforced patrols to secure Jaiba, including the displaced person sites, to deter further incursions and to try to reassure a population that is traumatized. Bintou Keita also appealed to everyone's sense of responsibility and humanity to put an end to this new wave of violence. And from Gaza, our World Food Program colleagues tell us they've reached more than 860,000 men, women, and children with food parcels, hot meals, bread, and cash assistance. More than 19,000 metric tons of World Food Program food have entered Gaza. WFP has also distributed nutrition packs to some 85,000 people, including children under 5 and pregnant and breastfeeding women. WFP has provided more than 90,000 people with cash assistance in the last 2 weeks, enabling them to meet their basic needs. Overall, the cash working group partners have provided multi-purpose cash assistance to about 230,000 people. Efforts are also underway to establish more food distribution points, especially in North Gaza, to reduce travel distances, transport costs, and protection risks for families. Partners are also providing fuel for critical services. Yesterday, WHO delivered 5,000 liters of fuel to Al-Auda Hospital in North Gaza Governorate. Today, WHO also distributed 100,000 liters of fuel to hospitals in Gaza City. And as you can imagine, the fuel is critical to make generators work. In the south, education partners in Rafah are preparing for the reopening of at least a dozen schools as displaced families return to their home areas. As you know, schools across the Strip have been used as shelters for Palestinians displaced during the 15 months of hostilities. In Khan Yunis and Deir al-Balah, partners are providing cleaning material to prepare vacant classrooms to restart learning activities. And in the West Bank, our humanitarian colleagues tell us that operations by the Israeli forces in northern area are still ongoing. This has been the longest security operation in the West Bank in 2 decades. WFP has provided cash to more than 190,000 people and food assistance to 8,000 in the area. And in Jenin, WFP reached more than 1,100 households with 100 households displaced outside of the refugee camp with a one-time cash transfer to cover basic needs. And turning to Syria, our humanitarian colleagues tell us that over the past 2 days, 77 trucks carrying UN aid have crossed from Turkey to Idlib through the Bab al-Hawa border crossing. The trucks carried 1,600 metric tons of WFP food aid, as well as health supplies, blankets, and other items from UNICEF and the International Organization for Migration. Since the start of the year, nearly 200 trucks with food aid from the UN has crossed from Turkey. That's more than triple the amount compared to same time last year. To better understand the needs, OCHA is also increasing the weekly assessment and monitoring missions in Syria. This week, our colleagues completed 2 such missions in the Tel Rafat and Nubul sub-districts in Aleppo Governorate and 2 villages in the Suran sub-district in Hama Governorate. The teams met and discussed with local authorities and communities. Both missions revealed a significant scale of destruction of homes and infrastructure. There are no limits or there are no or limited health care and facilities and basic services available for hundreds of returnees. Many have returned from displacement camps in northern Syria, carrying nothing but their personal belongings. And just as a reminder that many of the 6 million Syrian refugees in neighboring countries are weighing the momentous decisions to whether or not to return to their homes in Syria. Since December, UNHCR estimates that some 270,000 have returned home to Syria. And just on the political end, Geir Pedersen, a special envoy for Syria, is in Munich to attend the security conference. Prior to that, he participated in the Paris conference on Syria. In a joint statement, the representatives of the conference reaffirmed the commitment to a free, inclusive, and sovereign Syria, aligned with the key principles of Security Council Resolution 2254. They also urged for the setting of a clear timeline for constitutional reform and free elections. Participants also highlighted the UN's key role in the process and endorsed Mr. Pedersen's efforts. Separately, he had a bilateral meeting with the foreign minister of the caretaker government, Assad al-Shibani, reaffirming our support for the transition. And just a quick note from our peacekeepers in Abyei, who strongly condemned the recent carjacking incident by unknown gunmen targeting UN personnel and contractors in northern parts of Abyei. In the past 2 weeks, 2 separate incidents have been recorded. Gunmen also seized personal belongings of staff while subjecting them to rough physical treatment. These criminal acts may potentially hinder the effective implementation of our mandate there, and we urge authorities and community leaders in Abyei to work closely with the mission and its investigation to bring the perpetrators to justice. Finally, it's Valentine's Day. What do we love more than roses and chocolates on Valentine's Day? Money, exactly. So today, 3 member states have paid their dues in full. 3 European nations, 1 North African nation. 3 of the 4 have access to the Mediterranean. The 4th is sometimes considered a Mediterranean country due to its climate, history, and culture, but does not have access to the Mediterranean. It's a tough one today. We thank our friends in Algiers, in Zagreb, in Monaco, and Belgrade for their country's payment to the regular budget. We are now up to 57. Deji, and then Yvonne.
Yes, there was an attack, a drone attack at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. We saw the IAEA statement. What does the Secretary General have to say on this incident?
I mean, we agree with what Mr. Grossi has said. It's obviously yet another extremely worrying development in the conflict that we have seen. It's another, obviously increases the risks of a horrendous and uncontrollable nuclear accident. And I think the Secretary General has repeatedly expressed that opinion throughout the unfolding situation in and around Zaporizhzhia.
Such kind of attack is not to anybody's interest, is that right?
I mean, I think you can answer that question, Deji.
Yes, I think it's right.
Right, and when I say an uncontrollable nuclear incident, it is obviously in no one's interest.
Right. Okay. My next question on Syria, we heard there's another batch of 77 trucks of cross-border humanitarian delivery. Yeah. Right. Can you explain a little bit why there's still cross-border humanitarian
because
deliveries?
it's logistically it's easier. First of all, we already have the logistical hub in Gaziantep and other places in southern Turkey, given the state of the roads, but also given the insecurity that we're seeing in parts of Syria. It makes sense to keep using it, and we're obviously grateful, to Turkey and to the transitional authorities in Syria that permit us to continue to use those points. Yvonne Murray, RTE.
Thank you very much. The US Vice President J.D. Vance has told European leaders this morning that the biggest threat to Europe is not from external actors like Russia and China, but internal issues to do with immigration and restrictions on free speech. Does the Secretary General think that he's right?
I mean, we are seeing a lot of remarks and speeches by various political leaders. We're not going to do color commentary on it. The Secretary General thinks we are in a moment of great uncertainty globally, and we hope that all member states can work constructively as one through the structures of the UN, which already exist, to try to deal with all of these challenges. All right, anybody online? Excellent. That was short and very sweet. See you Monday.